We
are
We
cultivate.
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 Cultivate. We are cultivate.
Hello and welcome to a special mini-sode of Ye Olde Crime, the show where Maddie and I discuss the funny, strange, and obscure crimes of yesteryear every Wednesday. This special bi-weekly segment is called Can You Crack the Cramp-Word, which is slang for a difficult or obscure term, which I thought was very fitting. And joining me today is Kirsten from the Byte-Sized Blessings podcast. And before we begin, I'd like to give her the opportunity to tell us a little more about herself and her show before we get started. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Can you tell? Because I'm like bopping all over the place. Let's see. I went to seminary. I have a master's of divinity, graduated in the middle of the pandemic, and was like, where are all the jobs? And of course, there were none. I'm a panentheist, by the way, for anyone who cares. And so basically, so much frustration, isolation, loneliness during the pandemic. And I thought, what are some stories that I'd like to hear? And I'd never done a podcast before, but people always approach me and say, hey, this weird thing happened to me. And I thought maybe other people want to hear about weird things that happen. So I started the podcast, and the premise is I ask everybody under the sun, have you ever seen or witnessed or experienced something magical or miraculous? What you'd quantify as that, and how did it change your life? And so I've had everything from someone who died 3 times to a mother that changed someone's life to a best friendship to people have visions and it's changed their lives. So pretty much everything. And then I'm an author. I'm rewriting the Peter Rabbit book series. It's been really fun, but more aggressively engaging with the environmental and societal cultural issues that are going on today. It's going to be a 13-book series and eventually become a little sci-fi-y because I love sci-fi. And I have an animated series. I mean, I'm kind of a writer, if you want to just, a writer who podcasts. So yeah.
That's actually, you hit on like all the different things that I'm planning to ask you about. So it's like you knew what I was going to be asking you about. It's crazy.
What?
It's like we're on the same wavelength or something. It's weird.
Yes.
So, as you mentioned on your, you literally just mentioned the term panentheism. I can't talk. Words are hard. I know. But that word. So, can you explain a little to our listeners kind of what that means? Because I had never heard of it before I went on your website.
Yeah. Well, when I went to seminary, I grew up all over the world in, among other places, Bangladesh, Thailand, Pakistan. So I always tell everybody that I've seen too much of the world to kind of just choose one religion or one way of belief.
Sure.
But also I've also seen a lot of beautiful people practicing so many different other religions. I just don't think that there is one that's right. And so, but panentheism is more, I would say, a natural world, earth-based kind of way of viewing the world and how sacred the world is. And I basically, believe that there is spirit in everything, that everything has consciousness, that everything is sacred, everything, should be considered when we are making decisions in the world. So yeah, yes, that's it. It encompasses everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's a great way of explaining it. Because I was reading a little bit of it and I was like, it's kind of a little bit of all the things. It's a little
All
bit
the
of
things.
everything. I love that phrase. All the things. That's kind of, I say that all the time. So you also mentioned that you are a writer. So can you tell our listeners what specifically about the works and imaginings of Beatrix Potter sort of inspired you to create this little series that you're creating?
Yeah. Well, I've always been really drawn to her life and how she, in a time where women weren't allowed, quote unquote, to do what she was doing, she just forged ahead and basically said, I don't care. I am good at this. I create beautiful art. I'm going to do it. And by the way, I'm going to write books too. And she was from a relatively well-to-do family. And, back then that was kind of a no-no. You just
Mhm.
didn't do that, put yourself out there. So I appreciated that about her. But Peter Rabbit is, I think, in my perception, really subversive on its own anyway.
Mhm.
And, whether it's Peter's rabbit getting baked into a pie and, killed, and
Mhm.
all these animals, right, living in this world where, the rules are different for humans versus the animals, and they're just all trying to get along. They're all trying to
Yep.
survive, which is a great analogy for humans.
Mhm.
So many of us are just trying to survive, or get along, have the day go well for once. And I love how you can learn little morals or messages. Some of her stories are pretty grim, really
Yeah.
dark. And I really appreciate that too. I mean, she didn't sugarcoat a lot, but she also
Mm-mm.
wasn't overt. And so
Yeah.
sometimes you can use your imagination or what she's not saying to understand what's actually happened.
Yep.
So, yeah, I love all that about her. She's really provocative, and that's what I appreciate.
When you first were telling me about your books, and for our listeners, I've read the first 3, so you have 3 out currently. Which you don't know, and I actually am gonna take my headphones off so I can show you. Show and Tell.
Yay! I love show and tell.
One of the first books that I ever got from my grandparents is the complete works of Beatrix Potter.
Oh my gosh. Oh,
So, this is a book that it's got the 23 original Peter Rabbit books, and I got this from my
oh
grandparents,
yeah.
and I used to read this, like, all the time. So when you were talking about it, like, it immediately took me back to, the stories of, like, Mrs. Tiggywinkle and, the
Yes.
hedgehog and Tom Kitten and all those different fun little characters and Mrs. Tittlemouse, and yeah, so I was very excited to talk to you about it because yeah, like, this was just part of my childhood, like that and the Little House books, Laura Ingalls
Oh
Wilder,
yeah. Yes. Yes, yes.
which and her story is also wild too, like the fact that she didn't actually really write any of her own books. It was her daughter that wrote them for her. And I've read quite a few books about her, and she's also got a very interesting life about her
Amazing.
telling her own stories and stuff, and how she would write sections of her life, and then
Mm.
her daughter would kind of flush it out a little bit more so it could
Okay.
be published. So she did, in essence, write the books, but her daughter kind of copy edited them for her to make them
Yeah.
more palatable for a mainstream audience.
You always need a good copy editor.
You do, you do.
Yes.
And who better than your kid who can be like, "Okay, mom, I need
Yes.
more." You can't just say, "And then there was a flood." Like,
Right.
"I need I need a little bit more information here, mom." Like, that's not gonna sell books, sorry. Reading about that was really fun just because at the time her daughter was also a writer. And so she was writing her own books as well as writing her mother's books. And so it was very interesting, like the dynamic between the two and the types of books she wanted to write versus the book she wrote for her mother. And it was very interesting.
Right. Oh,
So
cool. I didn't know any of that. I love it.
yeah, it's a fun like peek behind the curtain. And it makes me a little sad because I tried reading those books to my kids, but they're just so far removed from it now that like they
Yeah.
can't even fathom any of the
Yeah.
things that are talked about in those books. Like
Yeah.
they're like, "What does churning butter mean?" And I was like, "Uh, all right. I kind of
Let's go in
okay.
the kitchen and I'll show you right now.
Let's get some buttermilk and put it in a
Yes.
jar and we'll just shake it all day."
Yes.
Yeah, because I don't think I will give this last like kudos to I think it was my 3rd grade teacher. She was a lover of books, and she made a point of reading the first book in a variety of series to us in class. And with Little House in the Big Woods, when they're making butter, as she was reading it to us, she would have us pass around a jar with buttermilk in it, and we would shake it as she was reading the story to us.
What? That's amazing.
So then at the very end of the book, we had this like butter. And granted, she like would keep it in a fridge and stuff and like bring it back. But like at the end, we
Yeah.
were able to taste this butter and be like, oh, this is what they used to do, you know? Like, so it was like almost like an immersive experience she would take us on. And
That's amazing.
yeah, with like Lion the Witch in the Wardrobe, she brought in some Turkish delight, which I don't think is very good. But that's just me. But, so it was like it made the books more real. And I think that's really cool that there are some people that can take it to that extreme where it takes these intangible ideas for people who have no concept of what this world is and making it more concrete and tangible to be like, oh, this is really cool,
Yeah.
So
What an incredible teacher. Oh my gosh.
yeah, yeah, I think of her every once in a while and I'm like, oh, I miss her. I wonder what she's
Wow.
doing. So yeah, but yeah, huge reader, huge book nerd. So, and it's probably because of teachers like that that really instilled a love of reading in us.
I love that.
My last question for you is probably my favorite. And it is, if you could invite anyone, living or departed, to be a guest on your show, who would you want to chat with and why?
Ooh. Oh my gosh. I mean, Nikola Tesla. Are you
Oh
kidding?
man.
I mean,
Oh my
honestly,
God.
my Instagram handle is Edison Sucks One because I can't detest Thomas Edison with every atom of my being. It's like an old grudge. People know not to bring up Tesla around me because I get so fired up. But, he had such an interesting and singular life, but his way of relating to the world and seeing the possibilities in it was so far beyond even this time for
Mm-hmm.
what he imagined could happen, what was out there. And,
Mm-hmm.
several of the several of biographies I've read, he had a really strange, like he had a connection to something that I think most people don't have. In that, he had a dream where he saw his mother die before she died. He had a lot
Mm-hmm.
of like psychic, really interesting things happen with him.
Mm-hmm.
Was a lifelong bachelor, but that's, they don't know why exactly. He was total man about town. Everybody thought he was a super cutie, but he never
Mm-hmm.
settled down with anyone. Very, very eccentric. And I mean, his brain worked so that he would envision machines down to the last detail and then just be able to build them and they would work automatically.
Yeah.
And a person like that who lives in that space of just, I don't know, ultimate potential of
Mm-hmm.
possibility of seeing things that we're not doing or things that could be improved on. I want to talk to that person, but
Mm-hmm.
him especially with all his electricity and
Mm-hmm.
this really interesting relationship he had with it. I actually just watched a show and it was talking about these two people, these two men who each one of them had gotten hit by lightning 7 times,
Oh
7
my
times,
God.
and they were still alive, and, doctors are like, "We don't know why they got." It's like the lightning just gravitates towards them,
Mm-hmm.
but, I mean, they have shown that some humans are conductors. They have lower levels of iron in their blood, so the lightning kind of they think they're just guessing at this point,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Who
I
knows?
I'd like to imagine Tesla was like that. He could speak to the electricity and that energy in a way that hopefully someday we'll get to that place,
Mm-hmm.
you know? But yeah, definitely hands down
That is such
Tesla.
an interesting choice. I would not have picked that for you. But as you were explaining it, I was like, yeah, he would be really cool to talk to. Like,
Well, I'm a science nerd. Like I do have this show about miracles and magic, but I've been reading science magazines since I was a kid
mhm,
and have just been, somewhat weirdly addicted to science in a really passionate way. So I'm always, questing for knowledge.
mhm,
And I especially love people who are groundbreakers, who see things that other people don't. And so
mhm.
that's why Tesla is like at the top. Top,
There you go.
top.
That
Yes.
makes
Yeah.
sense. All right. I have no more questions. So if
Okay.
you are ready, we can
I'm
move on
ready.
to the
Yes.
Victorian
Yes.
slang portion.
Yes.
All right. Your first term is Kennedy, and I can use it in a sentence.
Kennedy. Yes, use it in a sentence. Oh.
Okay. He was charged with threatening to Kennedy one of the constables.
Wow. Let's see. Ooh, maybe use a truncheon to, like, beat someone? That's what my guess is. I don't know, beat them senseless. I'm trying to think of non-outlandish things or something
Mhm.
that would someone would have on hand so that you could Kennedy someone. Let's see. Gosh, that's such an interesting term. I, of course, go to JFK, but that's not what we're talking about.
I know, I know. When
Ah,
I first saw it, I immediately went to, like, the Kennedy family.
yes, yes, yes. He's not gonna, like, beat them with his handsome face and
No.
wealth. Okay. How about, I don't know, something outlandish? Put them in a potato sack and drop them in the river.
You've been Kennedy'd.
Yes. Bam. Done.
Oh, well, you were on the right track with your initial guess.
Okay.
So, Kennedy means to strike or kill with a poker. So, like a fireplace poker.
Oh.
There's a whole story behind this, which I am going to share with you.
Okay.
So, according to Green's Dictionary of Slang, this term was first introduced in 1770, and it came about in cases argued and adjudged in the Court of King's Bench in the year of our Lord, 1769. The said Matthew Kennedy, with a certain iron poker of the value of sixpence, which he, the said Matthew Kennedy, had in his right hand, then and there, feloniously, wilfully, and of their malice aforethought, did strike the said John Bigby. So he essentially, this Matthew Kennedy, made a name for himself by killing somebody with an iron poker.
Oh
So then,
my gosh.
anytime you would threaten to hit somebody or actually kill them with a poker, it was referred to as a Kennedy.
I find that hard to believe that that was the first time that had ever happened, you know?
Right? I think
Yeah.
it's just because it was such a sensational court case that that's how it became a thing. And I don't know enough about Matthew Kennedy himself to know if he was like a person of particular standing where it was like he
Mm.
would have been well known enough in the community for it to be like, oh yeah, we got to name this thing after him. You know what I mean? But I just thought when I saw the full definition of why it came about, I was like, wow, that is like
My god.
it's petty, and also it's kinda cool to have something so awful named after you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah. That's actually hilarious. Ooh.
God. So your second term is pigeon, and I can
Oh.
use it in a sentence if you would
Yeah,
like.
please do, please do.
When it came to pranks, Daisy was a bit of a pigeon.
You know what's so funny is that Teslas, do you know much about Tesla?
I know a little bit. I'm a little rusty, but I've read some books on him a few years ago.
At the end of his life, his basically all he did was sit in a park and feed pigeons, and he actually, this is what they say, fell in love with one pigeon, and the
Oh,
pigeon
that's
fell in love
right.
with him and
That's
would
right.
come and sit on his windowsill in the hotel that he lived in, and she basically became his de facto just love, the love of his
Mhm.
life. He very, very eccentric. I would interview the Tesla before he fell in love with a pigeon, not the post
Yeah.
pigeon Tesla. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna use the word rube as in gullible, like someone, and the only reason I'm guessing that is because I love the show Shadow and Bone. I'm not sure if you've
Oh,
seen
yeah,
it
yeah.
on
Yeah, yeah.
Netflix,
I've
and
read the books,
they
yep.
use that all the time on that show about the pigeons at the gaming tables. They're the ones that, they kinda they wanna fleece them and take all their money. So I'm gonna say rube or like someone who's gullible, someone's ripe for the plucking. Plicking? Plucking.
You are 1000% correct. A pigeon
Yes!
is a gullible or soft person.
Thank you, Lee Bardugo and Shadow and Bone.
Yes. Yeah. So the French slang of this, or argot, has the word pigeon or dupe, and vagabonds and brigands of Spain also use the word in their Germania or robbers language, calling someone a palomo or pigeon, meaning they are ignorant or
Amazing.
simple. So it's not just a British thing. It's kind of a across the board in Europe sort of thing. I thought that was interesting that it's has the same sort of
Mhm.
meaning across the board.
Well, and Palomo sounds like a drink, a cocktail,
It
you
does.
know? Yeah. Delicious. I'm sure it's already delicious, I can tell. I love that. Pigeon, yes, I got 50%. I
There you
think
go.
that's still an F, but I accept it.
But A for effort. I mean, like,
Yes, yes. Oh, yeah. I know, I know. Absolutely. I love this. This was so fun. I love learning new things, and
mhm.
so having new words in my repertoire makes me excited.
I mean, I don't
Thanks.
know how often you'll be able to use Kennedy, but who knows? Maybe you will
No, no,
somehow
true,
be able
true.
to work it into your lexicon. And
Yeah, and it'll make things interesting in my
yeah,
life, you know?
there
If
you
I
go.
threaten someone, I'll be like, "I'm gonna Kennedy you," and they'll be like, "I have no idea," and then I'll be like, "Let me go to a Home's goods store first and buy a poker, and then I'll be back. Stay here for, like, 20 minutes."
Or like break into an old Victorian mansion. Give me 2
Yeah.
seconds. I
Yes.
need to find their fireplace. I'll be right back.
Yes.
Well, I would like to thank Kirsten for joining me today for Can You Crack the Cramp-Word? And before we go, can you tell our listeners where they can find you on social media and when new episodes of your show come out?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So episodes typically come out on the weekends. Sometimes I have a little midweek fun episode, like a little bonus episode, but weekends, sometimes midweek. You can find me on Facebook at Bite-Sized Blessings, that archaic beast called Facebook.
Yes.
Instagram, Bite-Sized Blessings, the pod. And then YouTube is Bite-Sized Blessings. I'm sure as you know, having a podcast is like a
Mhm.
hustle and a half.
Yeah.
And I always have all these plans and ideas for what I'm going to do, and then invariably life gets in the way. And
Yes.
so I have, a TikTok channel which might be disappearing in the States soon because of
Who
what's going
knows?
on. It's so
Who kn
crazy. But there will hopefully be lots more content. And then you can buy my books, my Peter Rabbit series, at George R. R.
Yes.
Martin's bookstore in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I'm releasing the third book. You can buy my books on his website and find my podcast and my animated series and everything on my web page. Oh my God, what's wrong with me? I just had a brain short circuit. Website. Oh my gosh. That was like in real time. I had like a little
I
mini
watched it
hiccup.
happen.
I know.
You were like, "I know there's a word
Uh,
in there somewhere, but I
yes.
don't know what it is."
Oh God. It's at bitesizedblessings.com. And it's important to say it's BYTE, bite
Yes.
sized blessings, not BITE. So yeah, those are all the
Yes.
places you can find me.
Awesome. And we will have a link to all that in our show notes, so don't feel like you need to stop and write it down. We'll have it all ready for you to go. And on that note, as always, I'm Lindsay, and I'll see you next time with another tale as old as crime.